right, let's go through this presentation. This is my first one for this project, so we'll try to go through this pretty quickly. So for my front end, I have it deployed on Versal. When a user interacts with it, there is an API call using HTTP for the protocol. It goes to the backend, which I built with Next.js, GraphQL, and Apollo. And that backend then takes the data, it kind of like interprets it and sends it to the respective database fields and tables that it needs to go to, which that's going to Postgres as the database. Strapi is the admin panel. Some of the information does come through here when it comes to like authentication, I want to say, stuff like that, but that's where it goes. Data is then stored in the cloud to be accessed later, and render is what's hosting my database as well as the rest of the backend. Um, and then sometimes some like requests are cross-referenced with pre-existing data. This is kind of good to know because this is essentially the complex way of saying, hey, when you log in, it checks if there's something in the database that matches that login and if the two fields match for that same row in the table, basically, right? So the front end is made up of a few things. We're going to do this a little bit out of order. I have the components, which is made, the login, registration, the restaurant. These are basically just like the pieces that make up the actual functions of the application. And I mean, it's literally like a form, right? You put in your email, you put in your password, all that good stuff for that. And we do have layout, which controls how everything's kind of laid out and put together, but these are the ones that I think are a little bit more obvious. And then you have the pages that correspond with the components. So I think I like to think of the pages, um, beyond just the literal sense of a website page is like where you are on the website. It's also where these pieces or these components are put together. And some of these pages might be one-to-one, like the login page uses the login form. And some of these might have like more than one component kind of like connected to it. And then style-wise, we use Tailwind. I did a little bit of research on it because I didn't really understand what the benefit was, I guess, beyond, wow, this is really easy to use. I wanted to know why. It's a utility for structured like stylization tool. So what it does is because it's structured like this, when you make a change one place, it changes everything really smoothly and really just like in a very straightforward and logical way. It feels a lot to me like just using a paint bucket when you're in a program and it just like fills everything up for you and you're not sitting there and like coloring and like trying to patch all the holes. So that's what I really liked about Tailwind. For authentication, there's obviously the registration login component as well as the form, or yeah, components, you know, forms basically. You put in the information there, and then the context, the app context is what like determines what it needs to do in context of the situation. A lot of straightforward naming, right? So if you're putting in information for the first time on the registration page, and the app context, if you coded it really well, would go, hey, like I need to put a new entry in. If you put in information in the login page, app context will go, wait, I'm on the login page. I need to check the database to see, pass it along down the chain to see if it matches the entry in the database. And then it comes back and it goes, yeah, and you log in. And then it knows from that point on until you click sign out, every page you go on, you are now in a logged in status. So the actions that are available to you, like placing an order and whatnot, are determined by the status that the context keeps for the user. And then it communicates through Apollo, which then is able to send it down the line to Postgres. Uh, GraphQL, it's important to note that it's kind of like a query language essentially. So it's pretty one-to-one with Postgres, and Apollo kind of helps facilitate that communication. Strapi is a content management system that it goes through as well. It has some information there and some like the role authentication, right? If you didn't put in the role permissions, then it won't let the users access certain content. So that's part of it. And for payment processing, I use Stripe. I'm pretty familiar with payment processors from a previous role that I had. So I thought I'd put some extra information here that's really interesting. So what does a payment processor actually do? Because I think a lot of the times we don't think about what we're trying to do with like a credit card. Well, what it does is a couple things. One, it takes in the actual information and validates the payment. So the BIN is like the first 6 digits of your card, and that will essentially determine what kind of card it is. So if you ever start typing out your credit card number on some websites, you'll notice after about the first 6 digits or so, it might go, oh, that's a Visa immediately because certain BIN numbers belong to certain cards. And then AVS is the address verification system. It'll take the digits from your address, meaning like the house address, as well as the zip code, which are usually the two sets of digits. Apartments can sometimes end up in there too, and it's kind of a weird hit or miss thing. But that gets sent to the bank, and that's one of the ways that your bank or your, whoever the card belongs to confirms, hey, this is a valid transaction by the user, someone who has the access to the address, right? And that's why a lot of the times you have to put your billing address on a website as a way for them to verify payment to prove it's yours. And when it doesn't match up, it's, hey, that's not a valid payment. It charges the card fee. So when you have a card that's Visa, Amex, or MasterCard, they do charge a percentage, which is kind of interesting. And that's why there needs to be a payment processor to facilitate that. It batches the payments, sends it, and then allows you to do admin management. In the case of Stripe, it does at least, which is really nice because it would suck to be able to take payment and not be able to do the bookkeeping. So Stripe is super good for that. I've worked with it a little bit, and I was excited to use it on this project. But on to the next presentation.